Even a market like Vietnam, for example, which is one of the better stories globally in the frontier and emerging market space, has seen consistent foreign selling even this year, despite strong macro environment. So it's not like 2013 and 2018 where you had the Fed raising rates and you had a taper tantrum where you saw foreign outflows. There's already been foreign outflows the last couple of years within our markets. And second is, if you look at domestically also what's happening within our universe. I mean, some central banks within our universe have already been pretty aggressive in raising interest rates. For example, Pakistan has raised rates by almost 300 basis points the last 3 months, so very aggressive. Sri Lanka has raised rates by 50 basis points. And also Vietnam. I think Vietnam is a different story over here because despite what the Fed does, or if the Fed gets too aggressive, Vietnam has enough room to have a loose fiscal and monetary policy in 2022 because they have recovered from the strict lockdown and the serious pandemic outbreak they had last year. And also inflation in Vietnam is well under control. The central bank's target's about 4%. The inflation is less than 2% in Vietnam. So I think it depends on the country you look at as well overall.
How do you see Omicron impacting Vietnam, though? Do you think that the supply chain issues that we've been seeing that plagued last year are going to ease a little bit more this year, or could it get worse?
But I think countries like Vietnam or in general in the region have basically decided to live with the virus. One, because of the fact that I think the economic cost of a lockdown or serious lockdown is way too high now. We are in the third year of the pandemic now. And also vaccination rates have increased significantly across our universe, especially Vietnam. In fact, in Vietnam, a large part, or in fact, a majority of the adult population is now fully vaccinated. So I don't see Omicron as serious a threat as Delta was last year, because many countries have kind of adapted to how to control or live with the virus as long as the situation or hospitalization levels are not out of control. So I see Vietnam, in fact, posting a pretty strong recovery in 2022.
Richard, give me a sense of what you look at in these, the various companies you select in the various nations that you're looking at. What sort of themes are you following? Are you following themes such as this big take-up in tech taking place, for instance, as well? A lot of these countries are in their nascency when it comes to that. So, and if you can, please also identify some of the companies you've invested in with regards to it.
Yes, absolutely. I think tech or in general digital finance is really a big theme in our markets. I mean, you've seen that picked up in India and also Southeast Asia, across Indonesia and some of the other ASEAN markets. But within our universe, I think it's still coming off from very low base. For example, the size of the e-commerce industry in Pakistan and Bangladesh is less than $5 billion, which is extremely small. So they're growing from very low base. But there are three important factors which is driving the growth of, in general, the internet sector in our markets. One is the increasing smartphone and internet penetration within our markets. For example, in Pakistan, the smartphone penetration is less than 20%. Two, there's a high cash usage across our market, so that'll people are shifting towards more digital payments. And three, the pandemic has really led to a shift in consumer behavior over the last probably 18 to 24 months. From a digital perspective, or from a listed equity perspective, there's still not too many names within our markets to focus on the story compared to, say, ASEAN or even India for that matter now. But one story which basically investors have not really looked at very aggressively is in Kazakhstan, out of all the places, which people which actually they ignore. It's a company called Kaspi, which is basically, in my view, way ahead of the game in the smartphone or in the super app game. They've completely built a very strong ecosystem across digital payments, e-commerce, and also online credit. So they're profitable, they pay a dividend. So it completely stands out compared to other tech players in the region.
And a lot of people, when they look at frontier markets, they always worry about the liquidity issue. Do you think that justifies that there should be some type of premium on illiquidity?
Well, actually, if you look at the liquidity question, which many investors pose, in fact, that's completely changed, especially post-pandemic, because domestic investors have come in such a strong way across our markets. For example, Vietnam, there's at least $1 billion a day of volume every day, which is even higher than Singapore now, which is not the case in 2019 or almost 2 years ago. So domestic retail investors have really come in a very strong way across our markets, and that's led to pretty much doubling of volumes across our markets. So I don't really buy the argument that liquidity is an issue in frontier markets. Yes, in a few markets, in a few names, there are issues, but I would say Asian frontier markets are definitely more liquid and more tradable than some of the frontier markets, say in Africa or Eastern Europe or Latin America.
Richard, final question. Isn't the curse of death being a frontier market and then being told you're an emerging market now, because funds change and they don't seem as attractive, do they, for emerging market portfolio managers quite often? I'll take the example of Pakistan, for instance. It got EM status, and, well, the Karachi Stock Exchange went into the mire.
Well, I think Pakistan is a different case. I mean, when they went to EM status or emerging market index in 2017, their weight was extremely small, I mean 0.1% or something like that. So it's not as if that was going to attract a lot of flows anyway. In fact, it's probably better or blessing in disguise that they're in the frontier market index now. At least they would have a higher weight compared to what they had in the EM index, and more investors could pay attention to it. So that's a different case. But Vietnam, for that matter, is in frontier index now. There's been a lot of talk about them going to emerging market index, but I still think it's a few years away because they have to change many of the foreign ownership rules and some of the other requirements that that MSCI needs. So it'll take some time.